Hunter x Hunter is back, and with a violent display to boot. It didn't pull any punches, jumping right into the events that had started in Chapter 390. Sure, it's exciting to start off with some heads being blown off, but it can be a bit confusing seeing as we haven't had a chapter in such a long time. So before we get into what's happening now, let's take a moment to remember what happened previously. I'm sure we all need the refresher. Let's dive in. Previously, Hinrigh Began Duffno, working for the Shiyu family, announced to his team that they would be starting a feud to crush rival family Hyli. Their family is headed by Morena, Nasubi, the current ruler of Kakin Empire's mistress. So not only should she be uninvolved, considering the battle is meant to be between the princes trying to win the succession, but she's also known for using underhanded tactics. As Lynch and Zakuro are told to question a man at the bar, clearly looking out for the Hyli family, they're immediately attacked. Meanwhile, the story switches over to their boss. Hinrigh goes after an unnamed woman from the Hyli group, offering to spare her life so long as she leads him to her boss. Unfortunately, she's able to get away due to a loophole. Morena didn't register them as members of the Mafia, so they're considered civilians who will be defended by the military if fighting goes on for more than 5 minutes. If you consider how many people, even civilians, could be able to use NEN and the damage that could be caused in just 5 minutes, I feel like they're asking for lots of death on this ship. But anyway, that's not my call to make. Zakuro, using his blood manipulation technique called It's a Bloody Small World, counters the member from the Hyli, while his partner Lynch uses her power to question him, by beating his inner voice out of him. Her technique is an emission type called Body and Soul. Now, I know it sounds strange, but literally every time she hits the person, they're forced to reveal their inner thoughts to her. So even someone who wouldn't break under torture wouldn't have a choice but to fess up everything they know. It's pretty useful, and could come more in handy if perhaps she were an investigator. But oh well. But because of the loophole mentioned earlier, Hinrigh pulls them both away and says, "It's over, we're going back." The military tells them the confrontation can be ignored this time, because it wasn't self-defense. But if they return to Tier 3 of the ship, they'll be arrested on sight. At that, Hinrigh thanks them and offers them bribe money for their trouble. Of course, that's not all it is. If the Hyli family is allowed to play dirty, so are they. As he begins to leave, having touched their guns to emphasize that they won't need to be used, they suddenly turn into snakes and fire themselves at the 2 military guards, blowing their brains out. That's why and how the new chapter begins with that same violent shot. No pun intended. Before that, it might be good to check out Hinrigh's profile. He's a conjurer and the underboss of the Shiyu family. His ability is called All Creatures Great and Small, Biohazard. What this means is that he can turn any weapon or equipment he touches into an animal under his control, but it can still do the same thing it did as an inanimate object. Simple enough, right? Oh, and the benefactor for his group is Zhongli, the 3rd prince of the Kakin Empire. Let's move forward now. The double shots and deaths leave everyone around shocked by the sudden violence, wondering what happened out of nowhere, especially since it looks like the 2 men decided to kill each other. While the people hurry to find more soldiers and medical help, Hinrigh tells his 2 teammates that they need to focus on their real goal, locating Hisoka, since that's what was asked of them. Hinrigh does point out, however, that they shouldn't make any moves against him if they find him first. That sounds like a pretty kind thing for a team leader to say. Or maybe he knows how tough it would be for anyone, regardless of their NEN abilities, to take Hisoka down. Besides, Hinrigh also has his own goal, involving getting his hands on more Hyli members and finding that mystery woman that got away earlier. But before we get into more exciting confrontations, don't forget to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, and smash that like button if you want more Hunter x Hunter content from us. Lynch and Zakuro go down a quiet hall, preparing and searching for anyone they can find. The blood inside Zakuro's IV bags, which he uses for his NEN ability, is splattered on the nearby wall. But then, it begins to move, as if pulled by something like a magnet, walking on its own. It moves down the hall and up to the ceiling, with Lynch commenting about how gross it is. To be fair, it could be cute if it had faces, but just seeing droplets of blood moving across walls and ceilings is kind of freaky. Or so I thought. As Lynch takes one of them, feeling bad about what they said, they inspect the drop, feeling even more disgusted. It turns out, they actually have eyes on them. She also squishes it between her fingers, dissipating it, but the droplet still goes back to its original form. And of course, Lynch continues to say, ew. Considering that it can reform itself, it would be hard to fully destroy them, since they're both sentient and liquid. Lynch asks Zakuro how someone could kill a droplet, which makes him perplexed. Why would anyone want to kill them? Those are parts of him, kind of like his babies. So it makes sense that it would be an odd question for him who created them in the first place. Regardless, he reveals to us that the NEN in the droplets runs out after 30 to 40 minutes, which then makes them turn back into normal blood drops. As if ignoring that response, Lynch points out that the plan is for him to find a shady guy with his ability, and then she would punch him until they know if they're hiding something. Apparently, that's their usual plan, so Zakuro seems unimpressed by it. Or at least wanting to switch it up a bit, I guess. Back to Hinrigh, we see him walking through a crowd of people down a hall. As he looks around, we're shown that he has pigeons around him, helping him scout out the large area. For the most part, people look busy and like they're not hiding anything. He walks silently through the people, no one commenting on his pigeons. Which is interesting. I'd certainly walk up to him and ask if I could pet one. Eventually, he sees a group that seem like tourists, smiling and taking pictures of each other. This gives Hinrigh the idea to ask a guard for some help. The guard asks the people if he can see their photos, Hinrigh likely looking for either High Lee members or any hint of Hisoka hiding out. Unfortunately, the first photos seem perfectly normal. He continues on with his hunt though, asking other people next. Eventually, an older couple shares their footage on a camcorder, and at last, there's some hope. The mystery woman is in the background of one of their shots, walking down a dark hall. Hinrigh admits that he wanted to check the area leading to the general passenger area, because it's the only way that connects the two sections. Either way, he has no choice but to continue on with his plan because he needs to identify the 23 members of Morena's group, the Lee family. With that in mind, he takes the camera from the couple, offering them some money in exchange for it, and also in case it gets damaged for any reason. You never know when he's facing other NEN users. For safety purposes, he transforms the camcorder into a spotted cat, but also uses it as a subtle means for recording anything he might see that looks suspicious, since it retains the same function as the machine it used to be. Following the order, the kitty makes its way to a wide open area, where a beautiful statue is displayed in the center. It places itself exactly where the couple had been when they posed together, and it stares at the hall, recording any and all movement. Even with that in place, Hinrigh has little confidence in all the members gathering in that one area. He even reminds us that the thug of a fourth prince is gone, which makes the High Lee free to do more than they could previously. Another thought strikes him. What if they're planning a rebellion from the second class, which has a lot of resentment towards the higher classes? Hinrigh points out that it would make sense, considering this senseless massacre is some kind of training. From the side, some people discuss him, knowing exactly who he is and that he works for the Shiyu family. We don't see their faces right away. As we get a good view of them, we're not given any names or a sense of how strong they might be. However, one of them is annoyed that Hinrigh is on his own, and clearly underestimating them. One of the other guys says that Hinrigh's N is stretched to a 5-meter radius, so if they step anywhere near that, he'll immediately notice. At that, the last dude announces he'll trigger it first and provide a distraction while the other two finish Hinrigh off. They continue to discuss the plan, saying how it's very straightforward, but at the same time telling us that if they flash their pieces, it will not only grab his attention, but if they succeed, they'd be getting a level boost of 10 from his death. Of course, they can't agree on who gets the boost and how to split it, already trying to plan for an outcome that's not assured. But you know how some people can be. Eventually, they decide to let the boss make the choices on who gets what, since it's her power that allows for it in the first place. The guy who was planning to go in first admits he doesn't care what happens after, as long as he can get the kill. Easier said than done. And finally, we're given names to the faces, after much longer than needed. Padui is a conjurer, he's a demolition laborer, and he's level 29. Karol is a level 22 mechanic who uses emitting techniques. And Deverai is a level 24 civil engineer, enhancer. Good to see we've got some variety among them at least. Padui says, "I always like to imagine that I could be reborn as a living weapon." With that statement, he conjures a weapon from within, turning his hand into something like a larger and sharper axe than we're normally used to. It might also be combined with a hammer for extra effectiveness. As we see it, Padui talks about how much he loves the feeling of killing and blood, and it's revealed that his technique is called lethal weapon disorder. And it was made possible for him to feel it directly through a weapon, while becoming one with it because of his boss Morena. Because of that, he's focused on doing what she asks, and also continuing to feel those things through accomplishing the tasks. Mr. Weapon Hand walks towards Hinrigh, who still has his pigeons flying around him by the way. And as mentioned, if anyone gets within 5 meters, he'll know, which is exactly what happens, as even before Padui swings, he's aware of him. Suddenly, a handcuff latches around Padui's weapon hand, surprising him when the other part of it is one of the pigeon friends Hinrigh had nearby. With a confident look, Hinrigh says, "Did you think a power like that would help?" The other part of the pigeon reverts to its original form, handcuffs, trapping Padui's hands behind him with the metal cuffs. Not even trying to attack, Hinrigh tells the other two to come at him as well, so they can be done with this. And even goes so far as saying, "May as well call your backup too." Ominously, he reminds them there's still many pigeons around for him to use against them, and none of us have any idea what form they were before his power changed them. At that, Carol and Deverai take their guns out, getting ready for the confrontation. Without hesitation, they start shooting off their guns, aiming partly at the pigeons around Hinrigh and the rest at the man directly. At that, he can't help but laugh. Sure, they look alive now, but they're handcuffs. But not just that, they're reinforced with Hinrigh's NEN. Due to their minor distraction, Padawee was able to cut himself free of the cuffs and rushes towards Hinrigh. With a blatantly shocked expression, Hinrigh's eyes bulge and he raises his hand to try and avert the attack. Having turned his weapon into a drill, Padawee manages to break through Hinrigh's hand, trying to attack more deadly areas. Although I and all us other readers were given the information beforehand, Hinrigh didn't know Padawee could change into any weapon he wants, not just that hammer axe thing he had before. With a psychotic grin, Padawee ignores him and says, "There are many ways to die. Different strokes for different folks." In other words, he can kill him or anyone else in any way he likes, using a different weapon each time. But Hinrigh isn't just going to allow that. He kicks at Padawee's legs, which he isn't focusing on since he's using his hand weapon to attack. As he loses his balance, Hinrigh gets another pigeon cuff attached to Padawee's leg, dragging it backwards to cuff to his non-weaponized hand. Curiously, or confidently, I can't tell by his blank stare, Hinrigh asks him what he'll do now. Unfortunately for Padawee, the two other men start backing away from the fight, not wanting to pursue Hinrigh anymore. But Padawee is too involved, overcome with the need to continue fighting and probably trying to win. He decides he'll free himself if he needs to, and figures he can chop off the handcuffs with his axe hand. But instead, Hinrigh is behind him, pushing the axe to the back of his head, forcing it against his neck. With a devious smile, he says, "Not everyone gets to be both predator and prey." All Padawee can respond to that is, as his eyes bleed and life begins to drain from his body. The fight, and of course the death, starts to draw a crowd. Hinrigh complains that he was trying to keep a low profile, which is now not possible. He thinks to himself that he's leaving the rest to Misha now, while the two men with Padawee rush off to report what happened to their boss Morena. They can both report about how dangerous he is, as well as his pigeons and their usage. The final text reads, "Hinrigh kills two birds with one stone. What domination!" And I have to agree, he did so well just on his own and using some minor investigative skills. Just a note though, I believe Misha is referring to the cat that Hinrigh created from the camcorder he borrowed. If it's not that, then it's someone we haven't met yet, and we'll get to know very soon. But in terms of logic, it seems like the perpetual recording device watching the hall for the mystery woman would be a candidate for who Hinrigh is relying on. No? Anyway, that's all we have for now. What did you think of the chapter? Do you think Hinrigh will survive another fight with members of the Hyley family? Do you think Hisoka has been discovered yet by Zurako and Lynch? Let us know in the comments below. As always, I'm Jack Stansbury. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.